strong enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot.
Chapter 28. What do you want us to do? Damon asked. And I said, you are going to make sure that Banton takes care of this whole conductor situation. And you're going to help him remember that we're on the same side now. And he nodded, and Banton said, so you're not as immediately trusting as before. And I said, I have to take care of my own. Also, your soldiers' guns aren't going to work anymore. And that was surprising and a little bit worrying to them, but I said, but you're going to need them to figure out everything on the ground to hide what we're doing. And Banton said, there's no way that you're going to be able to hide this from the Profithians. They're going to find out that, or he didn't say from the Profithians, from the Zellans. He said, they're going to find out that two worlds are still existing. And I said, we'll worry about that later. For right now, we're going to do what we can. And I said, but I have to get to another ship. And I held out my gate that I had made to connect me to Scar. And I could feel where she was, but I couldn't overlap worlds. And I thought, right, we're on the same world. And so I had to hop back through my emergency gate to Itero, keeping it separate. And there was havoc going on the traveling gate as the librarians were trying to figure out what in the world to do with the Profithians that I just sent here. And through this emergency gate, I'd only sent the scenes, the blue Profithians for decision. Not blue-skinned, blue uniformed. And yeah, the librarians were trying to figure it out, and I said, change of plans, send him back through. And I ignored Itero's exasperated expression. And I turned to Banton's son. I said, your father's a good man, and he needs your help. Are you willing to help him? And I could tell that he didn't trust me. I'd been learning how to read Profithian facial expressions. Not like studying them, just, learning them here and there. But he didn't trust me. But I could see that he figured he was going to get killed here or killed there, and he'd rather be with his dad. And so he slowly nodded, and I said, good. I turned to librarians, and I said, we're going to help decision. We'll give you more orders. And the librarians didn't know me as well as, the other people that I worked with. And so they were a little hesitant, but I knew they would follow orders. I trusted them to send the Profithians back through. Meanwhile, I needed to get to Scar. And from here, I could feel where she was. I overlapped the two worlds, and as I did, I could see the scene around, and I pulled myself through to where Scar was. And we were holding the same stone, and so my hand ended up in hers. And she kind of jumped when I came through and pulled me into a hug. And I held her for a minute as I looked around the scene. She was in a command room exactly the same as how I had left it, but every Profithian was dead on the floor. And the controls were sparking and torn through. This was not the best situation. I said, what happened? And Scar explained that Chessa, their seer, had been hit even before Scar had taken out the anti-searing technology. She said 4587 took her back, and Endurance and I came here. We killed all the Profithians, but in the time in between, they set something on the controls and destroyed the panels so that we couldn't change it. I didn't even need Desire to know that this was not good, but Siring just made this situation look a lot more desperate. That side panel that we needed to control the conductor was part of the main system, which had been damaged, and even with Siring, I wasn't going to be able to fix what was going on. And I said, well, we can't stop the mind control, but maybe we can, like, remove the mind control from the conductor. And she gave me a look and looked back out the window where the Goliathan conductor sat beneath us. And she said, remove the city from off of its head? She said, gee, that's not going to happen. You said we had 10 minutes. That was 8 minutes ago. She said, I've had time to think it through. The only thing, like, the blasters are gone. The systems are gone. The only thing that's left are part of the flight systems. She said, someone's going to have to ram it into the conductor, into that city, to be able to destroy the mind control. She said, I just brought you here to say goodbye. Scar can be a little bit dramatic at times. I said, Scar, we're not losing you to this mission. And she said, I've thought about it. There's no other way. And, I mean, there were other ways. There weren't any other really good ways that were coming to mind right now and that Destiny could see. But one thing was for sure. I was not losing Scar today. And she said, I've thought about it. She said, gee, they don't need me. The Serremeans need you. Grant is gone. Darren doesn't even remember me anymore. And I said, Scar, the Serremeans may not need you. The Serremeans may need me, but I need you. I'm not losing you today. And she pulled me into a hug again and gave me a long kiss and pulled out a gate from her pocket, trying to send me through. I could feel it, and I was the stronger traveler, and so when she opened up the portal, I sent her through to Serremea, and she disappeared from my arms in a surge of light, her gate clattering to the ground. Yep, I sired the gate back into my hand and looked out the window again, sighing to feel how much time we had left. 20 seconds. Which was not a lot of time, but when your ship's going up to Mach 10, that's enough time. I grabbed the acceleration control, using Destiny to put things where they needed to be, and I threw the lever forward. It was designed the ship was designed in such a way that, it would pull you back when you accelerated to stop you from accelerating to Mach 10 from 0. But, well, not 0, we were still traveling a few hundred, not that fast. We were still traveling quickly. But I threw the lever forward and immediately felt myself get thrown back, and I had to sire against the air behind me to force myself forward as my body grew heavier as the ship accelerated like nothing I'd ever been in before. In the second that it took to cross the space between us and the conductor, I reached out and took hold of Serremea and the world of decision. But instead of overlapping the worlds, because that would have still kept me in physical danger, and I still needed to be holding on to this thing, I drew the worlds apart from myself instead of overlapping them. I took hold of the world of Serremea, and with that hold I was able to pull the world of decision away from me, and I felt the lines of light pull away from me, and everything around me was still light and color. I could see the other worlds layered upon the other worlds. But decision slipped away. I could still see it as... how do I explain this? As like a ring, a sphere of lights around me. I could still see what was happening there, as the entire thing turned to red and orange and quickly died away to gray and black. The ship had crashed, hopefully the conductor was gone. And I went to pull myself into Serremea, but nothing happened. And the world of decision continued to dissipate around me as lines of light and color flowed from my chest. And I couldn't get hold on anything, and I looked down at the gate in my hands, and it was made of a million materials. The gate itself passed through these worlds, and I realized I had nothing to connect me to anything that was around. And I kind of started to panic as these lines continued to surge outward from me. I couldn't get hold on anything. It wasn't physical enough, or rather, it was too physical. I was a being of one world, and I couldn't take hold on the countless worlds that surged around me and flooded away from me. The sounds, the smells, the feels were there, and I could experience each world. I experienced each one intimately as it passed through, but I couldn't take hold on any of them. And still, the worlds continued to surge away from me. I felt like I was sinking in every direction as the worlds began to speed up into an endless blur. I began to panic for another reason, because I realized there was no air in this place between worlds. When I breathed out, the particles had coursed back into the strings around. But there was nothing else here to breathe, to feel, to stand on, to anything. There was no direction, and that was it. I think just because of how fast I began to fall through the worlds, it felt like I was there for an eternity. It couldn't have been long, though. Long enough that my mind began to not to go, but and I don't know if it was the panic or just what it was, but everything became so blurred that I began to see beyond the strings of light and color that surged all around me. And there was a person there in the lines of light. A person that at first I thought it was destiny, but this person was more than destiny. It knew everything that destiny knew, but perfectly. And it had emotion, but of its own volition. And it had mastered those. I could feel its perfect knowledge, perfect joy, perfect love. Completely powerful. Like destiny, but without the limitations of ISO. And the person reached forward and took my shoulder, and I could feel its hand. I could feel his hand through the strings. This was a person from the worlds, but independent of them. He smiled at me and he said, "Reggie, let's get you back home." And in that moment, without moving a muscle, all of the worlds they stopped and began to surge back the other direction, and passing through me infinitely fast, but at the same moment I was on the traveling platform in Serremea. Everything cleared. The air filled my lungs, and the smell of fresh cut wood and stone from the still new city filled my lungs. The clamor of soldiers and librarians and everything going on, it was too much for my mind to take. And everything went black and I collapsed. The next thing that I remember was Darren's voice as I heard him say it, it feels like this constant pressure, like something forced against the back of my eyes and the sides of and the back of my neck. And I opened my eyes to find myself in Darren's room. I was in a small bed that looked like it had been brought in. He was in his own bed. I could hear Darren's voice again. He spoke quickly and forcefully, and I knew that was just because he knew he was going to lose his train of thought again, and he wanted to get out his thoughts before they ended. But I like to imagine that it was because he was speaking that way because he'd gained back everything he had before. His speech was pretty much back to normal at this point. His memory still only came in bits. Though we were making progress with that, it was his concentration that was really the struggle and wasn't better than it had been before. I heard him sigh and fall silent, which was the sign that he was done and he needed a break. And after I heard some footsteps come around to my side of the bed, and I forced myself to keep my eyes open even though I felt so tired. I was trying to remember what had happened, and then I remembered decision. Slipping through the gates, and then being saved. I'd never been really pious before this. But I didn't know what to make of what had just happened and who I had seen. I decided now was not the time to let people know what had just happened. I needed to think through this before I came to any conclusions or said anything about this. And I still don't entirely understand what happened. But I watched as Scar and Filaire came over, and they saw that I was awake, and they rushed to my side. Scar tried to help me up, but I waved her away. I was going to stay lying down. I just felt so drained. And Filaire said, "Gee, are you okay? What happened?" And I said, "I honestly don't know." And I heard Darren come over as well when the others rushed over, and he came over still squinting, but he was able to stand, which was a big victory for us. He'd only done that once or twice that I'd seen before this. And they said that Ferrando had seen that I'd slipped between the worlds, and he didn't see anything else that had happened at that point, but I came back without a gate. And they're like, "How did that happen?" I just said, "I don't know." And I said, "Did the rest of the mission work out?" And Scar said all of the conductors were stopped, except for Decor's group. She said even, like, you were able to stop the one, like my conductor as well, but one of the conductors did its job. And that made me feel a little bit hopeless, and I said, what happened?" And she said, "We're still not sure. It hit Moro, which is far enough away that things are still okay, but something feels different." She said that gravity is odd. To some point she heard an architect on the way back, and through all of this, saying that it would affect the way that we'd have to build buildings from now on, and we'd have to reinforce everything that we'd built thus far. as well, Firando had sired to see what was there, like what had happened in Moro, and the entire place pretty much was underwater. And any of the Serremeans that were there were likely dead at this point. I closed my eyes again. Demaya's cry was safe, but we lost an entire region. I said I need some rest before I can think more about this, and they left me to my thoughts, which were not where I wanted them to be. But the rest was what I needed, and yeah. That's the end of chapter 28.